afternoon, and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding the light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. Today, to represent Black excellence, we have a very special guest with a very special film he made. It's called Who Killed Malcolm X? The 2020 explosive 6-part Netflix docuseries about the life and assassination of the civil rights leader. A film which led to the exoneration of 2 wrongly convicted men. This is something that rarely happens. So what you've done is changed the life for the people, and that is amazing. Congratulations. And we are talking with Emmy and Peabody Award-winning Director and Producer and member of Directors Guild of America, Mr. PHIL Bertelsen. Welcome to My Harlem Portraits.
Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled to have you because the reason why I do this program and I live in Harlem is Malcolm X. I read his autobiography when I was a teenager, and I decided I want to go and see what he's talking about. And from that moment on, I was hooked. So this is fantastic for me. So your body of work, which has been presented at prestigious festivals worldwide, is very impressive and very diverse and focuses on, and I'm going to quote you, overlooked aspects of history, emphasizing the critical role that Black history plays in the broader narrative of American history. It sounds like your goals are definitely online with the goals of my show. Couldn't be the best guest to have today, so thank you for that. Naming just a few TV series, you have Madam Secretary and the Blacklist, as well as documentaries for Netflix, NBC, PBS, HBO, Paramount, like Seen and Heard, 761st Tank Battalion, the original Black Panthers, which features Morgan Freeman, Hope and Fury, MLK Jr., and the media's role in the civil rights movement, Through the Fire, about the Barack Obama's presidency, Beyond the Steps, Alvin Ealing American Dance Theater, a look on them, and I'm Both and I'm Bossed, about the Shirley Chisholm's historical presidential candidacy. I didn't know you were the one who did all these. I watched most of these and they are fantastic. So I'm very, when I read this, I thought, oh my God, he's doing all this? Incredible.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to choose this important historical, very defining moments?
With regard to Malcolm, it chose me. All of these. Well, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I kind of was driven to tell stories that I knew little about. So I wasn't relearning history. In many ways, I was learning it for the first time. I mean, I knew various aspects of this history, various individuals. I'd heard their name or knew a little bit about their achievements, but not enough to really know for sure. And so when I had the opportunity to tell stories that were little known to me, I assumed that they were little known to others as well. And so that's kind of how the path was chosen for me, by me, and in spite of me, all at once. So I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to tell these great stories.
You're only learning something that's fundamental. And what happened with Malcolm X? How did you come about this?
Well, I actually was very reluctant at first to be involved in this series, knowing the controversy around Malcolm, around his relationship with the Nation of Islam. And, it was kind of nerve-wracking, to be honest, to be on the the hunt for a man who was hiding in plain sight, who was a known assassin, or at least known to some. But again, it felt like something I couldn't ignore. It was a project that was developed by my partners at Arc Media and was looking for some direction. And so alongside my producing partner, Rachel DRETZIN, I took it on, and I'm grateful that I did. It was about a 2-year odyssey to get to the end point. Interestingly enough, the film almost never saw the light of day.
Oh, wow.
But, due to the diplomacy and, should I say, statesmanship of one of our executive producers, Henry Louis Gates Jr., we were able to see it to its rightful end. And fortunately, it wound up on Netflix and got the attention of the Manhattan DA's office.
This is incredible. I didn't know this, but I was going to ask you, one of the questions I was going to ask you was, did you ever feel under pressure, rejected sometimes, watched, threatened during? Yes, you did, right?
Yeah, some very strange things happened over the course of making that film. Two notable things. One, I, at the time was in an apartment that was right down the street from Mosque number 7, which was Malcolm's Mosque. It sits on 116th and what is now Malcolm X Boulevard.
Right next door to me.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
what
we were neighbors, didn't even know.
116 and Malcolm X Boulevard. That's where I live.
That's it. So you see the mosque, and it's
every day,
dome every day, and the call to prayer you could hear. And Malcolm was known to sit on a bench at Morningside Park on a regular basis, and when he wanted to have meetings out of earshot of what he knew to be the listening FBI. And that bench was right near where I lived. And over the course of it, at the time, there were a lot of strange things happening. My phone was never working properly. One time I had to actually get a new phone. And I was told by Apple that they couldn't let me keep my old phone, but they had to, they'd give me a new one as long as I gave them my old one. And just to be sure I had it backed up, they erased all the data on the phone. And anyway, that was curious to me. But I didn't feel like I had anything to hide, so I didn't worry too much. And I was a little bit heightened in my paranoia, obviously, knowing what Malcolm had gone through in the later years of his life. And another point, I heard a knock on my apartment door. No one rang or buzzed below, and I looked through the peephole, and it's NYPD is standing at my door. And so they got into the building, they got to my apartment, and I asked them what they wanted, and they said, are you so-and-so? And I said, yes. We're just here to let you know that your car is parked in a New York City bus stop. And we wanted you to know it was there before we towed it. I thought that was a nice courtesy.
Yes, but
it was also, it felt like, oh, they just wanted to know I was where my paperwork said I would be in the event that they needed to come for me. So it was that kind of pressure that I was under that it seems minor, but when you know enough about the surveillance of Malcolm and how his every move was calculated and marked and trailed, you'd start to have your own doubts about the legitimacy of the kindness of law enforcement.
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't have trusted that. So
nothing happened significantly as a result, but I could tell that they were keeping an eye on me.
Yeah. One last thing before we go on to Malcolm completely. You have a 4-part documentary series about the shared history of Black Americans and Jewish Americans that is now streaming on PBS, which I watched, and is also extremely, extremely interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell us
It's called Black
briefly
and
about
Jewish
that.
America.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
very, very interesting. And it gives us a piece of history that rarely is talked about. So
Yeah.
thank you about that. So you and I met on May 19 at Malcolm X at 101 celebration, where it was his life and legacy celebrated at the Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Center, where you and your colleague, Naila Ife Sims, Rachel DRETZIN, Shyla Harris, received the Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Vanguard Award. You were honored for your extraordinary investigative series that unveiled the truth on a very dramatic moment in the history of civil rights movement, the assassination of Malcolm X. And it reads, demonstrating extraordinary leadership, courage, and service that embody the principle Malcolm X championed during his lifetime. How does it feel to receive such a recognition from the daughters of Malcolm and Betty Shabazz, Dr. ILYASAH SHABAZZ and Malak Shabazz?
It was a tremendous honor to receive that award, to be quite honest, in a space that, became critical to our investigation, in fact. It was in that room we interviewed ILYASAH, the only daughter we were able to talk to at the time for the series. She was gracious enough to sit for an interview and then became a really instrumental kind of ambassador to the series. It was very important that we had the Shabazz family support, so we weren't seen as doing something without their consent. And I think in the end, the family felt gratified with the fact that we had indeed done work that went a long way toward exonerating wrongfully convicted men and knowing the role that justice played in their father's life, the pursuit of justice, the willingness to speak truth to power were all on display in the series. And really, we have everything we owe everything, I should say, to their father's example in that regard.
Yeah. And it's very important that they were involved in this, especially ILYASAH, because she is really the one who's bearing the torch of her parents all over the world. And in other circumstances, the family was not involved. And I think when you are writing, when you're doing a film or a documentary about a famous person, a civil rights leader, and so on, it's very important to involve the people who really knew him. It's fundamental. You have
Yes.
that's
I mean, the cast of participants were mostly eyewitnesses to that history, were confidants of Malcolm, were disciples, were soldiers of the Fruit of Islam, the Nation of Islam. So we were very deliberate in talking to people who lived the history, not just those that studied it. And that's one of the significant, I think, differences between our series and a lot of historical series.
yes.
We did have an opportunity to speak to people who lived it.
And you showed it in all your documentaries. And it follows in specific the work of Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, who is an historian and a tour guide in Washington, D.C., who for more than 30 years have been investigating on the assassination of Malcolm X. That is a very important point. Tell us why you chose that.
Well, we came across Abdur-Rahman through another historian who we had spent some time with when we were making our film about Martin Luther King Jr. and the media. It was called Hope and Fury. It was for NBC. And I was with my producing partner, Rachel DRETZIN talking to historian, Pulitzer Prize winning historian David Garrow. And we happened to ask him, just as an aside, who did he think knew the most about this moment in history, particularly Malcolm and his assassination. And he said, without flinching, Abdur-Rahman Muhammad. And he said he's in Washington, D.C., and he's not a traditional scholar. You won't find him at a university. In fact, you'll find him giving tours at the Arlington National Cemetery. And indeed, that's where we found him. And sure enough, he had dedicated the better part of his adult life to, unraveling the mystery around Malcolm's murder, and had a lot of information that very few people did. He was also cited in Manning Marable's biography, on which this series is largely based, about Malcolm. And so he had that credibility as well. We didn't know the extent to which he would be involved with the series. At the time, we thought maybe he would just be someone that would sit for an interview and share what he knew. But over time, we realized that, this was an active investigation and we needed an investigator, and who better than this man who, had the relationships, had the insights. He was a Muslim American himself. So that's when we set about making him our, what we like to call our citizen sleuth.
Fantastic. What an amazing finding. What a precious. So tell us a little bit what happened for those who don't know. Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21st, 1965, in the Audubon Ballroom, which is the place that is now being transformed in a celebration of his life by Betty Shabazz first and her daughters now, assassinated by members of a Nation of Islam. 3 men were arrested and convicted of the crime, but only one, Thomas Hagan, also known as Mujahid Abdul Halim, admitted to be one of the gunmen during the trial. He kept on saying that the other 2 were convicted with him were not. They were not guilty of that. Tell us what happened.
That's correct. And, there were known to be 5 gunmen actually on the scene that day. And as you say, Thomas Hagan was really the only one who was apprehended at the scene, and in large part because members, or I should say audience members, had basically tackled him to the ground and got into a tussle so that the NYPD, could apprehend him. The NYPD was not on site at the time. There was no security at the door, and that was at Malcolm's behest. So the moment was ripe for opportunity. By the time they go to trial, the NYPD had arrested 2 additional men that they claimed were part of this plot. In fact, gunmen. And it turns out that they were not guilty. However, they were essentially railroaded and sent to jail, spent 20 plus years in prison for a crime that they didn't commit. And the evidence that we were able to present in the series was enough to, raise the interest of first Barry Scheck and his Innocence Project, as well as the Shaney's law firm, headed by David Shaney's, and then ultimately the Manhattan DA. They decided to reopen the case with the high bar of, providing new evidence, not revisiting old evidence, but new evidence that would point to the innocence of the wrongfully convicted men, and they indeed found that. It's a long trail to that point, a few years, in fact, and all of it happening during COVID. But it led to what ultimately meant that the vacancy of the conviction, the exoneration, And then the men then, in this case, Norman 3X Butler, who became known as Muhammad Aziz, and Khalil Islam, who posthumously were exonerated and awarded some money for their wrongful conviction from both the state and the city of New York.
And this is all thanks to your documentary. In November 2021, they were completely exonerated, as you just said, after the joint investigation. And in 2022, you had another victory, thanks to your documentary, because the city and the state of New York agreed to pay a combined $36 million to settle the lawsuits on behalf of these two wrongly convicted men. So you did something really amazing. Unfortunately, Islam died in 2009 before his record was cleared. But you did something really amazing. Malcolm X, as always, all his life was dedicated to redress serious miscarriages of justice, redress justice in the civil rights and so on. So this was a very important moment. Tell me how you felt when this happened.
We were overjoyed. I mean, we had known, we knew the case was, being reworked and revisited, because we had, and you can see it in the series in episode 6, we had Abdur-Rahman submit a letter to the Manhattan DA's office and their conviction integrity unit to consider it. And they considered it and in fact did reopen it. So it was at that point we were closely monitoring their progress. They had our series that they were using to kind of inspire their reinvestigation, and at the same time, hunting for new evidence and a smoking gun. The degree to which, they found new evidence in the documentation, were not clear. I assume the Manhattan DA had access to unredacted FBI files, something we did not. But they also did uncover new evidence. They uncovered, or found, I should say, an eyewitness that was able to provide an alibi to Muhammad Aziz at the time.
Wow.
Because the only alibi he had at the time of trial in 1966 was his family, which law enforcement does not consider to be credible if you have loved ones attesting to your whereabouts. So they kind of tossed that out and never really considered it. But there was another man who in fact knew that Muhammad Aziz, then Norman Butler, was not where they said he was. And that man turned up at the Schomburg Library at a screening of one of our episodes, interestingly enough. So it all kind of trickled down from there. Yeah.
Amazing.
I don't know the man's name, to be honest. I would love to, but all of that's been hush hush.
That is so incredible. Very exciting, this story. Very, very exciting. Another very important happening, ILYASAH and Shabazz and civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump announced in a press conference held at the Shabazz Center that the family was suing the FBI, the CIA, and the NYPD for $100 million for conspiring to kill Malcolm X. Tell us about the importance of this.
Yeah, so that was 2023, and then the exonerations happened, and I think the family rightfully, alongside Attorney Crump, believed that whatever evidence they had uncovered in order to set those men free might implicate law enforcement, in this case the NYPD and the FBI, as conspirators or co-conspirators in this crime. So that is ongoing. That suit has been filed. It's a civil lawsuit, which would bring redress to the family, the people who I believe to be most deserving of some reward for their suffering over the many, many years since they've lost their father and husband and just beloved, world leader. So as far as the details of that suit, the status, I don't know. It's difficult to say, where things lie there. You'd have to talk to Attorney Crump.
Yes.
But I imagine with this Department of Justice, it's not something that's moving too quickly.
Yeah, this Department of Justice is not really a Department of Justice.
Well,
So,
yeah, it's more of a Department of Vengeance.
yes, yes. So, why is this documentary about this story that happened so many years ago is so relevant today? And why do you think that Trump, who had made executive orders to declassify government files related to the assassination of JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King Jr., he has not done the same for Malcolm X. And Attorney Crump is asking why. What do you think?
No, I think it's a legitimate question. I think Malcolm today, just as he was yesterday, is, public enemy number one as far as the government is concerned, because he's unafraid to poke the bear, as it were, to point out the inconsistencies and hypocrisy of a government that claims to be of the people and for the people, when often it is against its own people. Of the three leaders that you mentioned, the Kennedy brothers and Dr. King, compared to Malcolm at that time, they were probably the least objectionable from an institutional standpoint.
Yeah.
But as to why not Malcolm, it's hard to say. I suspect there's something to hide.
Definitely. And we are gonna end on this question mark, because you have answered to so many other question marks during this doing of this movie, beautiful movie. I thank you for doing what you're doing, because all the works that you've done are very important. And
thank you,
luck.
Marie, for
Good
doing
luck.
this work. It's so great to have allies like you, bring attention to these lesser known histories that, as you say, are critical to the construction of this so-called democracy that we call the United States. So thank you for that. We really appreciate your efforts.
Yes, it's very important that for me to have people like you also that do that. So thank also to the Shabazz family. ILYASAH
Yes.
is a wonderful friend of mine. She is amazingly strong. She's got the genes, definitely the genes of her mother and father in her.
Indeed.
Who give her the strength that she has had. The whole family has had to keep quiet all these years.
Yes.
Because they suspected there were Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, yes, no, and so on. But they had to keep quiet because, and thanks to your documentary now, they finally have been able to ask for what is due to them. So
I
again,
hope so.
yes.
Yeah. I'd also like to thank my co-conspirators in the making of this series,
Yes.
not the least of which were Rachel DRETZIN, Naila Sims, Jayla Harris, and Abdur-Rahman Muhammad, without whom none of this would have happened. I certainly didn't do it alone.
Yes. Thank you so much to all of them. Thank you to you. Thank you to my viewer. See next Saturday, 12:30 p.m. on Spectrum, channel 1993, MNN HD, for all the other episodes on my YouTube channel, My Harlem Portraits. Bye-bye, and thank you again.
Grazie.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.